welcome to another edition of Scott Wheeler's Airplay. It's episode number 12, airing right now on Peoria Life Facebook page, Facebook Live, but we will post this interview on Facebook as well as YouTube, Peoria TV, Channel 17 on the i3 broadband system, and lots of other places. I'm Scott Wheeler from Super Hits WIRL, and if I were playing What's My Line today, I would, and if you couldn't see him, I would say things like, oh, he was an Illinois State graduate, U.S. Navy vet, multiple broadcast award winner, and then I might say, and he spent 42 years at WEEK-TV, and then you would know it's Tom McIntyre. Welcome to Airplay.
You know, WIRL was my first station in Peoria.
And it was WIRL-TV.
As well, right.
So take me back to that point, because did WIRL then become WRAU?
Yes.
Okay.
And then WHOI.
Okay, gotcha. So take me back to that point. What was the ownership dynamic there of the radio TV ownership?
Boy, I wish you hadn't asked me that question. That's at least 2 generations ago. I got out of the Navy and was looking desperately for work, and I had worked in radio in Bloomington Normal. Mm-hmm. And they saw no reason to rehire me, although federal law said they should have. And so I came over here looking for a job and was lucky enough to get one at WIRL, which was TV, radio as well. It was a combined news operation in that everything ran out of radio in Peoria, which was situated on Jefferson Street, not too far from here. And essentially, the morning crew came in for radio, they did the news, they collected the stuff, and about 3 o'clock, somebody from the TV side would collect all of our scripts and carry them over to Creve Coeur, where the TV station was
Really?
located.
Okay.
Yeah. Because, one can be honest now, it was kind of a cheap operation. And they had one news car, and it was Big Red. For those of you who are old enough, you'll remember Big Red. Big Red was the radio and TV news vehicle.
Have a picture of it in my studio.
Years later, by the way, I saw that parked at the Ford dealership under one owner. High miles, but they'd taken the antennas off and removed all the WIRL logos. It was still very obviously the car that had the crap beat out of it. Numerous reporters racing to fires. Yes. I can recall doing 70 miles an hour down Adams Street in Peoria.
I'm impressed it did 70 miles an hour.
Well, it was younger then. So was I. There's many stories about Big Red, but yeah. There was also Little Red, by the way, which was a Renault. Nobody remembers Little Red because it fell apart. Yeah, it was a combined operation, and really the TV side had some good people, but you know they weren't. All the attention went into the radio side, really, I think, at the time.
Isn't that funny? So did the TV people just read literally on camera the radio scripts that had been gathered?
It was rewritten, but as radio reporters, we carried a Bell & Howell 70DR film camera with us, which would hold 100 feet of film, which was about 3 minutes. Huh. And so every radio story we went out on, we just shot some silent film of the radio story we were on and passed that along to the TV side, and at 3 o'clock it went into the soup and got developed, and so that's how it was done.
That's funny because radio folks now carry their phones and take video for internet stories. So what goes around comes around.
We were breaking.
Yes, you were ahead of your time.
It was the cameras literally, and I
Oh, they must have been monsters.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, actually, they were not. And here's an interesting story, I think, because of the technology involved. The 70DR really was used during World War II in Korea. This was a cast iron camera. For the most part, it was a fixed lens. It was like you wanted a close-up shot, you walked up close to somebody. You wanted a wide shot, you walked back a ways and took a shot. Almost impossible to take a bad shot unless you put your finger in front of the lens. And so that's how I started photography. And it was pretty easy if it's a baby brownie because, there's no complicated zooms and what have you. And by the time I got to WEK sometime later, the beginning of the video revolution was started. And the film camera of the day was a Cinema Product CP16R, which was the light would hold 1,200 feet of film. It was probably 16 pounds. It would rest on your shoulder, had a zoom lens. You look through the lens. Great little camera. But everybody wanted video because the video is the new thing and you're going to have video. And it got you that late-breaking story. Because you remember, if you had to have film in the soup at 3 o'clock, that's when your time ended for getting stories on the air as far as video was concerned or film was concerned. So as a consequence, everybody wanted the video so they get those late-breaking stories. Live didn't exist. Let's just not even consider live at this point. But at least video, you could race out and grab that fire and race back and, just minutes ago, we shot this video of this house fire in which nobody was injured, but we had the video. And so the video cameras came out, and I remember when WEK got their first video camera, which was an RCA TK76. God, how you remember these things.
Yeah, I was going to say you were a walking encyclopedia.
No, there weren't that many cameras back. RCA cost $100,000.
Oh.
I know. And they hated it. All the photographers hated it. The thing weighed 35 pounds, and that was just a camera. The recorder weighed another 30. And that was on your shoulder, and you had to have this lead acid belt that you wore, which kept the light going because the video cameras required so much light to get a decent picture. So by the time you were through, and if you were carrying a tripod over your shoulder, by the way, you're about 70 pounds right there.
And that's when the chiropractic industry was born.
Very few female photographers back then. Mabel Miller, who still works for NBC in Chicago, was one of them. But, she was, God love her, a hefty gal. She could pick up 70 pounds of camera and all this stuff. But, I couldn't probably. And run with it like some of those guys did. So the video revolution was loved by news directors and probably managers and people who wanted to see that video and hated by photographers. It's just bulky stuff and heavy, and as soon as it got a little dark, the picture just disintegrated. It just was not fun. So that was the video revolution as far as we were concerned. And the best story of that, I'll tell this because it's fun. First camera, the TK76, the WEK news cars of the day, which are all the same. That's a tradition that remains. You get about 5 cars that all look identical so that the public thinks you've only got one car. Was a Chevy Citation. Remember Chevy Citations? Yes. Nice sloping roof. It's impossible for me to believe how Jerry Giesler, Tom Meyer, and Arena Lycan managed to do it, but they left the TK76 on top of the car after filming a story and drove off.
We've all done it with coffee cups, but not $100,000
not a $100,000 camera. And as the story went, according to them, they got onto the interstate safely, and then they heard that scraping noise.
Oh, no.
And it was, and you look in the rearview mirror and you see the camera bouncing. And then it was hit by the semi. And I was there, and they came back, the 3 of them. And Arena was an intern. Jerry Giesler was later became news director. Tom Meyer became a photographer in Denver. They're each carrying part of the camera. And the news director said, I'm not even going to try to explain this to the general manager. You 3 are going upstairs and explain why our only video camera is now in 3 pieces. And the sun was shining or something happened. I don't know. Phil Mersner was the general manager that day, and his answer was, well, I'm glad we've got insurance. And it was remarkable because we expected thunder and lightning to come from above, but it did not. They all came down, still had jobs. And we got a TK-76A as a replacement, which was a better camera.
So after all that fun at WIRL Radio and TV, you end up at WEK. What
No,
year?
I didn't. I ended up at WWTO.
I remember those call letters.
Yes.
The original call letters of 106, right?
Right,
Yep.
105.6. WWCT,
Yeah.
or which it became after WWTO.
Uh-huh.
Of course, it was going to become Cat Radio until somebody down the street thought that was a bad idea.
Party poopers.
That's not going to happen. All right, we understand now. Yeah. So, yeah, I was at WWTO for 2 years. The reason for that was WIRL got sold to Forward Communications. The TV and the radio side split. So the TV side got sold to Forward Communications. And this was the first time I'd gone through a sale of a company. And I was moderately terrified, as you are, because my job's going to be gone, you know, and I'll never work again. Not only that, Steve Hunter, who was the anchorman at 19 WIRL at the time, said, I've heard of these Forward people, and they're just going to rape us. They're just, it's going to be terrible. They're going to take this place apart and sell it, and I don't want to be part of it. And so Steve left and went to WGN as an anchorman. Rick James, who was the main reporter for radio, said, well, if things are going to go bad, I'm leaving too. He went to WCFL Radio in Chicago. Bob Potter was the assistant news director. And he said, well, if these guys are leaving, I'm leaving too. And he became the AP bureau chief in New Orleans.
Wow.
Lauren Brown was the sportscaster, who later became the voice of the Kansas City Chiefs. He left. We got an new assistant news director. He stayed, I think, for 4 weeks and also went to WGN in Chicago. So, I mean, people were, fleeing. And so I was,
Somebody's got to keep the lights on.
Yeah, I'll stay with radio where the jobs are. That's one of the phrases I remember saying. I'll stay with radio where the jobs are. And we all know how that works out. Sorry, I'm losing my microphone.
Yeah, that's okay.
I don't know that it is. Boy,
It's a low-budget show.
It is. Well, it's all right. We do our own work. Normally, a pretty girl would come in here and do this for me. But this is web. What can I say? So, like I say, I was going to stay in radio, and along with another guy, and because we knew that was a job, we'd be safe. Of course, what happened was
Talk to the future me.
WIRL immediately cut both of our jobs. And on the same time, Forward Communication hired Rowley Keith and Clark Smith, and completely just started hammering at the ratings and doing very, very well. So, that was the lesson I learned about listening to your colleagues about what the future is going to be, because they may not know really what's about. So, yeah. So that's why I went to WWTO. I was desperate for a job. And literally, I walked into a bar in downtown Peoria. Never mind which one.
With a rabbi and a priest? Is this how this goes?
No, I was by myself. I walked into the bar because my roommate at the time was a bartender. And I could get free drinks downtown. And I'm sitting there, and I noticed a guy that I had worked with at WIRL Radio some time before, and he hadn't been around. I hadn't seen him. Went to say hello. I said, how you doing? He said, I'm doing fine. How you doing? I said, I've just been fired. I've had about 2 weeks. And he said, really? He says, we're starting a new FM station in town. Show up at this address tomorrow. I think they might want to talk to you. And I did. And Paul Carnegie was the guy's name. Paul Carnegie, who was one of the two owners of... one
of the best voices in the world.
Absolutely. He was Paul Cannon in Detroit. The interesting thing about Paul, if you sat across from him, and his desk was situated so there were two walls like this, so his voice bounced on both walls before it rolled across the carpet to you. You could see the mat of the carpet go down. as he was talking to you. So, well, Tom, do you want the job? Yes, I do. Yes, please. I want to be employed. And he did. And he said, well, do you want to start work now, or when do you want to go? And I said, well, I still got 2 weeks left over at WIRL. You guys aren't on the air yet. So, I'll stay working over there and pick up some things. And so, of course, I went back to WIRL the next day, went to work, and started Xeroxing all of the contact numbers, the phone numbers, the advance sheets of things that were coming up in the news. Every night I was going through and just copying everything.
You naughty boy.
I was. I told one guy, I told Ira Bittner, I said, just so you know, Ira had kept his job, by the way. I don't understand why, but they liked him better than me. So Ira kept his job, and I said, Ira, just so you know, I'm going to go over to this new FM station in town. And in a couple of weeks when I leave here. And I just keep it a secret, will you? He said, not a problem. So probably 4 days later, I got a phone call at 5 o'clock in the morning. And it's Ira, and he says, your secret? Check page B13 of the Journal Star today. And so I walked out to the porch, got the newspaper, came back in. Tom McIntyre, formerly of WIRL, will be the new news director at WWTO. And I said, well, I wasn't formally until today. So I went to work. I went back to WIRL. Mort Cantor, pardon me. Yeah. Mort Castle's another friend of mine. Mort Cantor was the general manager. Mm-hmm. And he looked at me and, just said, congratulations.
See ya.
He didn't mean it. I know he didn't mean it. So that was a good 2 years.
So give me the year you ended up at EEK.
73, July 1st, 1973.
Wow. 42 years in that anchor desk, right?
No, not quite. About 40.
40.
Tom, that's another weird story. Didn't get so many of them.
Yes, I know. We'll have you back.
Yeah. What had happened was Tom Connor was news director and anchor at the time. And his co-anchor had been Bud Carter. Bud had rubbed management the wrong way. And so when the new general manager took over at WEEK, May 1st, 1973, his first act essentially was to call Bud and said, stay home. We'll send you your check. That was the same day of the St. Cecilia shootout, which left WEEK pretty much high and dry when it came to having somebody on the air. I mean, they had Tom, but they didn't have Bud. So they were down a significant person on the air. It was not their finest hour, to be perfectly blunt about it. They had gone into battle a man short. Channel 31, on the other hand, had Bill Marshall as a chief photographer over there, and he had grabbed his CP16 camera, light, runnable with, and had shot some excellent film.
Ended up on the network.
Ended up leading CBS News that night. That did not happen. Stanley was actually, the WEK photographer was closer than he was, but because he was using, and here goes back to my story, the Bell and Howell 76. TK-76.
He couldn't move.
He could not. It wasn't that he couldn't move. It was a fixed focus lens. It was a wide-angle lens.
Yeah.
It was a lovely shot for getting wide shots, but if you wanted to get close up, you had to walk close up, and people were shooting at each other.
Right.
I was shot at there, and I was not a participant, and so their footage did not look as good, to be blunt about it. And that's the way it was. So yeah, Stan ended up on the air trying to explain what happened, and it was kind of a mishmash. So they obviously needed somebody to take over with Tom. They needed another person. So with Bud gone, they moved another fellow into position there within the next couple of days. And that left open a reporter spot, which I filled. The fellow who moved into the co-anchor spot, as it turned out, had a warm spot in his heart for one of his colleagues who was married to somebody else. And so not that long after, they both left, which left a co-anchor spot open, which I slid gracefully into. Not wishing anybody ill fortune, but it worked.
You got to
out.
do what you got to do.
It worked out for me. Now that's just the way it was. I mean, it's pure luck. I have been the luckiest guy in broadcasting, certainly locally and probably nationwide in many ways, if only because I've never been out of work.
Yeah. And
Since I got out of college and went to work at WIOK in Normal, Illinois. And that was a terrible little station. We were competing against WJBC, which is, we really weren't. We were on the air at the same time. We weren't competing.
Understand.
Yeah. There was a terrible snowstorm over in Bloomington, just terrible snowstorm. WJBC, which had all kinds of reporters and salespeople, they just opened up their studio, had a round table, put about 9 microphones up. People were fielding phone calls. Forest Hill Road is closed because of the snow. The school bus will be stopped at that place until arrives. And it was one of those things where they're huge public service, because WIOK, on the other hand, had me, who was not all that familiar with McLean County, to be perfectly honest, even though I'd grown up there. And so we got kind of an award for not offering competition. And the general manager was very proud of that. Oh, we got an award for just playing music.
Sounds like Arthur Carlson.
Yeah.
Well, we have just scratched the surface, and we're out of time.
Really?
We are.
Oh.
But we will have you back, because I've got so much more to ask you.
Do you ever have any practical jokes on radio?
We're going to do a show on just that.
I think we could. I've got one of the great ones of all time.
Okay, save that.
All right.
The calendar is open in a few weeks. We've been talking with the legendary Tom McIntyre, formerly of WEEK TV, and now working with his competitor, Bob.
Well, competition is just, we're all in the same business.
Yeah, this is true.
So, and they offered me money.
Yeah.
So there you go.
So we're going to talk to him next time about that and more. Remember, you can see Scott Wheeler's Airplay on Peoria Life's web portal, Facebook, YouTube, Peoria TV, Channel 17 on the i3 broadband system. Until next time, it's Scott Wheeler for Airplay.
PeoriaLife.com.
You got it.